welcome back to another Daily Walk. And today we want to talk a little bit about prayer. Because I have a friend that just wrote a new book on prayer. It's called ASK, or Ask, Seek, and Knock. The admonition that Jesus gives us about prayer. And I'm going to go ahead first and foremost, full disclosure, my friend didn't ask me to review it. He didn't ask me to buy it. He said I released it. I bought it myself, read it. And of course, I've read a lot of books on prayer over the years. We've talked a lot about prayer over the years. I've read Tori's book on how to pray, which was good. Of course, I wrote a book, Hezekiah's Prayer. Maybe call me biased, but you should read that one too. But as far as books on prayer go, this particular book, and I will have a link for Ask down in the description. It's by C. Plants, actual real life friend of mine. And I want to mention that the reason you should read this book, he writes this book free of any form of denominationalism, free of any form of modern Christian expectation, free of all of those things which can kind of add to our biases and kind of shift around what we do as we consider what prayer is. Of course, as we all know, you go to church and, you either have churches that don't even mention prayer, or you have churches where everybody, particularly in the older congregation, stands up and announces all of their health maladies, that everybody should, pray for Brother Bob's liver spots or something like that, And the reality is neither of those are positions the Bible would take. Obviously, we have this Christian expectation walking up to people and saying, how can I pray for you today? And when we look at the model and the function of prayer in the Bible, it is a very interesting thing in that we shouldn't be running around collecting prayer, especially at some people, it can lead into like gossipiness. And we want to probably avoid that as much as possible as well. One commentator said, oftentimes we spread gossip in the form of prayer requests, and that in and of itself is a fundamental challenge. So he writes this book really seeking to understand, what does the Bible have to say? And he's got I think 8 or 9 chapters in here, and yeah, like 9 chapters including the epilogue here. But he kind of talks about the foundations. He talks about praying according to God's will, and then it gets into seeking and knocking, the prayers, and then it gets into the decisions, big praise. He talks about praying for one another. He talks about the health concerns, and then the ultimate wrapping up point, which we will get to last, because I think it is very good, and it's something he has challenged me on in that way, because of course, coming to Christ a long time ago and being around churches, you always hear this, pray for you, pray for me, all these types of things. The fact of the matter is, when we really take a serious and a private approach to prayer, we can see amazing things done without ever setting any human to be this ultimate source of that. And I can think back, and I did some pretty heavy praying for one particular person that I know a couple of years back, and I never told a single person, including that person, about it. And wouldn't you know it, that exactly the things I was praying for came about in that person's life. It was for a better, greater and better edification, living life. I mean, it was, and I don't really want to go into any details here, but it was very interesting to see that happen in response to a regular and a dedicated prayer that nobody else knew I was possibly praying. And that is ultimately those key issues. So he kind of gets into starting it out with a basic discussion on the foundations. And as he goes through here, he kind of talks about what are the basic foundations. Well, the first and basic foundation of prayer, and he goes into fine detail, prayer is effectively taking an audience with God, which God will not even take your request if you are not clean before his hands. In other words, if you're not living a life of righteousness, you need to get out there and live a better life of righteousness. And he supports this in several verses. One of those key verses is, if you regard iniquity in your heart, he will not hear your prayers. And then we talk about God's will. Obviously, God will not answer prayer separate to his individual will. So, if it's, you might have this desire, I want a big Ferrari and multi-millions, He shows this illustration here. Somebody's like, I'm going to pray God makes you money. Like, why stop there? Make me a multimillionaire, So the reality is true that we have to get in with prayer and really approach and get close to God. Then he gets into the seeking and knocking, and this is where we really take these requests. This is what would be called in prayer supplication. These are the things that we may need in the course of our life, and God does care about these things. We should take a lot of these things, that we should bring questions about what should we do before God. We should bring questions about which decisions or which direction, or hey, I really need this and I see no way it's going to happen in a real and physical way. God, can you help with this issue? And those are the types of prayers that we really see God answering. And then he has an entire section on decisions. How do you make a decision? Who do you marry? What school do you go to? What job do you take? There is a lot that he has to say in his book about those topics, and I want you to read those for yourself. He gets into a really fascinating discourse on big prayers, and then when he gets into the praying for another, this is the one issue that I really had to chew on a lot as we were discussing prayer a number of years back. Because the Bible, and I focused a lot, I had the whole book of James memorized, and in James 5 it says, pray for one another. There's a whole sequence of pray, but the sense of it is pray for one another that you may be healed. And having these early discussions that we shouldn't go around and discussing our prayer requests with everybody who asks, how may I pray for you? There's a little bit of a pushback thinking about this, and how he addresses it in the book makes perfect sense, really clarifies that point. That when we have prayer requests, we should first and foremost take them before God. And there are very few times, now this person has asked for some specific prayer requests over the years, but when he does, he's really been seeking God greatly in the process well before doing that. There are times you have to bring others into your prayers, but you shouldn't be bringing others into your prayers for the minorest of all the prayers. And we say, well, that seems weird. What do you mean the minorest of all prayers? The reality is there are a lot of prayers that we should seek and take to God on ourselves without other people knowing about it. So he talks about praying for one another, and he talks about the measures of health in there as well. And I want you to read those chapters for yourself. What I really want to focus on is this last one, because it's the biggest confrontation of our culture. And having read the scriptures more and more and chewed on the things that he has said, I completely agree with this viewpoint. And this is one of the reasons why, if you ask, how can I pray for you? I probably won't give you an answer. Okay? Because prayer ultimately, according to Jesus in the Bible, is private. Ultimately, prayer is private. Think about it. The Pharisees and even John the Baptist taught his disciples to pray, but Jesus' disciples had to come to Jesus and say, teach us how to pray. Why do you have to do that? Because he wasn't telling them how to pray. Jesus was always leaving them behind and praying in solitary. Even when he took his 3 core disciples with him, Peter, James, and John, to the Garden of Gethsemane, he still set them off over here and he went over there to pray alone. He says in Matthew 6, when you pray, don't do it publicly, do it inside of your private prayer closet. Now, he does address ceremonial prayers, like after a sermon. He doesn't address like the meal prayers in the book. I was curious about that. So there are times, of course, we have some form of public prayer. If you're starting a big Christian conference, obviously it makes sense to pray. If you're preaching a sermon, obviously it makes sense to pray. These are big ceremonial prayers. But the vast majority of your prayer life should be private before God. So don't be offended if you ask, how can I pray for you? And you ask me that question. Don't be offended when I don't give you an answer. Okay, because I truly have believed this for a long time. We talked about these things a number of years ago, and I've been chewing on this type of stuff for a long time. And the reality is, our prayer life should ultimately be private, and we should only let very certain key people in at very certain times in our life. And that is absolutely it. By and large, this is the best book on prayer I have ever read. I don't say that because it's a friend of mine. I say that because he gets rid of all of the denominational presupposition. He gets rid of all of the Christian presupposition. He gets right back only what does the Bible say, and he puts it together in a very clear and very concise way. I will leave the link for this book in the description down below. You can have a look at the book yourself. I'd encourage you to pick it up. I believe he has it as a Kindle and as a print book as well. So have a look over there. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy your daily walk in our Lord.